As a business owner, nobody teaches you how to actually run a business. One day you're working directly with customers, the next you have multiple team members reporting to you, each with unique functions. I'm Gabe Velez, CPA and business owner. Today I'm going to be introducing you to two well thought out management systems, six essential business components, and if you stay until the end, two additional resources you can use to run your business better. So starting out with the management systems, there are two that reign supreme in the small to medium-sized business environment. Okay, number one is going to be scaling up, and the scaling up system breaks down your business into four parts: people, strategy, execution, and cash. The other one is going to be the Entrepreneurial Operating System, otherwise known as EOS, which breaks down your business into six essential business components, starting with vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction. I've gone through both of these. I've tried to implement both of them in my business, and I've experienced other business owners trying to implement each of these. What I would say is for most of my clients, EOS is much more approachable and it's a much more complete framework. Really, not like the way they set it up is such that you don't really feel like you need to go outside of their ecosystem in order to get answers. And it's really built for like a business that is bootstrapped and that is like coming up from the ground up, where you're taking people from within the organization and you're promoting them into leadership positions, and maybe they haven't been in these leadership positions in the past, and they need context, they need training. EOS is going to be much more thought out from that perspective. What I would say about scaling up is it's really more intended for a little bit larger businesses, maybe 100 plus employees, because it's a much more wide open framework. It really expects that you're going to be able to hire and recruit people who are already experts in the different functions of your business. It also outlines kind of equal or gives equal weight to each, to strategy, cash, execution, and people. And what I would say is with larger businesses where they have additional resources and they're doing like M&A activity, strategy is something that is built into their day to day, versus most smaller businesses, up until like 50 employees, $50 million. It's really more about execution than it is about strategy, right? So you're not really developing new products or services. You're more niching down and refining the products and services that you currently have. And so that's the biggest difference. And so what I would say is EOS is better for most businesses. And like I said, it's a more cohesive, well thought out function system. So as such, I'm going to go through the six business components that they break a business down into. I'm going to go real high level because you can definitely go and buy the Traction book and get into more detail and get into their whole ecosystem. But I just want to give a really broad overview of the six components, so that you can determine whether or not it's a good system for you to try and implement yourself. So the first component is going to be the vision component. And vision really starts with core values, right? So what is your business about? What are the, like, how do you guys operate? How do you guys treat each other? How does the business move forward, right? What are your core values? Now, you might have people from diverse backgrounds in your organization, each with their own individual core values. But whenever you bring a team together, we need to actually suspend some of our core values and embrace the core values of the team that we're joining. And so, more and more as I implement EOS and as I do, work with my business coach and things like that, I really start to understand what core values mean from a leadership perspective and from leaving, like, being able to run a business to the point where you're not watching your back every day, or you're not really having to reinforce, what is right and what is wrong, because the core values are so much ingrained in your culture that you can rely on leadership and team members to reinforce the way that the business has grown. And one thing I'd like to comment on in regards to core values are that um, the core values of an organization might not be 100% aligned even with the core values of the founder of that business, right? Because as you start to bring other people in and listen to their perspectives and identify, what's actually going to move the company forward and what's actually going to move the team forward, the core values begin to create themselves, or present themselves. And um, so anyways, with the vision component, one of the major tools that Traction provides is the VTO, or Vision and Traction Organizer. And this is really a 2-page business plan that is meant to be distributed throughout the organization, keeping everybody on the same page, literally, as to what the goals of the company are, short-term and long-term goals, and then even giving an idea as to how we're going to get there, right? So that's the first component. All right, the next component is going to be the people component. So people component really has to do with who's on the bus, right? Who's part of the team, and how do you know if that person is the right person for your team? And the reason I place so much emphasis on the core values is that really the right people are going to be those people who share the core values of the organization, right? Uh, Again, they are really bought into what the company is about, what the team is about, and those are the right people to have in your organization. The next part of people component is going to be the right seat, right? So when they talk about right seat, it's identifying what the outcomes of each seat within the organization is, right? So what is your job title? What is your function? But moreover, what are the outcomes that the company needs you to come through on in order to make sure that we win as a team, right? So when you think about, the Bulls with Jordan, they really needed Rodman to go in and get those rebounds, and that was his function, and that was the outcome, and that was the reason that they recruited him in order to become a championship team, right? Jordan was the main scorer, Rodman the main rebounder. So everybody knowing what the outcome is and how they contribute to the team, and identifying those. And the one of the big tools that they use is what's called an accountability chart, which is kind of like an organizational chart, except on that sheet, it also shows what those 3 to 5 bullet points are, what the outcomes of that person, of that function is that the company needs. And then if the person sitting in that seat gets it, wants it, and then has the capacity to do it and actually follow through and get those outcomes, then that is said to be that person is in the right seat. So right people is all about core values, right seats all about GWC, or getting it, wanting it, and having the capacity to do it. And then obviously from an organizational standpoint, clearly identifying what those outcomes are is really important too, and embracing those in meetings and in one-to-ones with your team members. The next component is going to be the data component. So data component really has to do with KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. What are those 5 to 15 numbers that your company always needs to track? And different, if you have different teams or different sub teams within an organization, every team and then every individual is going to have a different number. So this is objective data. You can see it. You can report it on a regular basis and see, like, on this scorecard, on the scoreboard, are we winning or are we losing? And where are we winning and where are we losing, right? And so data components, super important. Um, you know, always want objective data, right? Sometimes you're dealing with the organization and you're like kind of caught up in different narratives and things like that. If you come back to the data component, that's really black and white, whether or not you're winning and losing. And then, yeah, so that's the data component. The next component that Traction is going to talk about is the issues component. So the issues component is really, well, two parts. Number one, it's building lists. All right, and they have three different lists. I'm going to talk about two right now. One is the long-term list, the long-term issues list, sorry. And the other one's going to be the short-term issues list. So the long-term issues list are going to be those big tasks or those big projects, those big to-dos, those big problems within your organization that it would take, let's say, about 90 days to actually accomplish and fix that problem. So I'll give you an idea. Like, let's say you're growing an organization and you've kind of pasted together a tech stack, right? So you have you have Microsoft Word for this, you have Google Sheets for that. You know, people are using OneNote or pen and paper to keep notes, and you decide that you want to centralize all of this and like have some kind of practice management solution. Well, migrating all of that data and, well, first off, even like shopping for what the correct software would be to actually do that, not to mention implementing it, not to mention retraining everyone. Well, that's going to be a long-term issue, right? Because you have to have a longer time horizon than just like a week or 2 weeks to get that done. You need to be consistent for at least 90 days in order to do that. Another challenge would be something like implementing a ERP for a manufacturing company, right? Enterprise resource planning. That's going to be a long-term issue, and and if you know that your company's headed that direction, or that's something that your company's missing, then first thing you do is you put it on the long-term issues list. Okay. Next is the short-term issues list. So short-term issues list is something that are things that come up throughout the organization, and maybe you smoke them out all during an annual or quarterly meeting. But these are things that can be accomplished in 1 to 2 weeks, right? Real short-term issues. And so you have these two issues. And the thing with business is you're always dealing with limited resources, right? So limited resources in that you're limited in time, right? In the amount of time you have, you're limited in the amount of people you have, you're limited in the amount of capital you have. And so there's so many things in business that you need to work through. The lists are never ending, right? So the key thing with these issues lists is to identify at the appropriate times what the most important issue is that can get addressed, and then to actually address it and follow through on it, right? And then some of the other issues, they just have to kind of stay on the list, because you can only focus and prioritize and do one really great thing at a time, and you can't address everything all at once. So those are the lists. The other part of the issues component is really the issue solving track, or the way that they address these issues. So IDS, or identify, discuss, solve, is how they really deal with the short-term issues list. And so let's say you have a leadership team meeting, it happens once a week, and you have a short-term issues list, and you're trying to hammer through these short-term issues list. Well, first thing you got to do is you got to identify what the actual issue is, and before you even open up discussion, right? Because the enemy and the waste of time in meetings is really tangents and spiraling, and not identifying what the true issue is, right? So identify is number one. Then you discuss. You might use like Dan Martell 1-3-1 method in order to actually identify what the possible solutions are. And then from there, then you actually solve the solution, and hopefully never have to address that issue ever again, because you've solved it so well. And really, there's only 3 different types of solutions to issues within an organization. Number 1 is awareness. Number 2 is a to-do. So somebody has to do something in order to fix that problem. And then number 3 is going to be research, right? So you don't have enough information in order to make a decision in the meeting. And so somebody is tasked with actually going out and doing additional research, and then bringing that to the next meeting. So that's the issues component in summary. All right, so the next component is going to be the process component, right? It's how you do what you do. And they really start with core processes, which are related to the core functions of the business, right? So identify your core processes. What happens on a regular basis that the company does in order to actually, do what it does, right? So you might have a sales process. You might have a process for creating what it is that you actually provide to your customers. You might have an accounting process, you might have a marketing process. So identify those core processes, and there's usually just, 5 to 15 core processes within an organization. Of course, there's sub processes, and you could later on get to documenting and detailing the standard operating procedures for all of your sub processes. But they really focus on, at least early on, documenting your core processes, the big broad strokes of how your business operates, and using that 80/20 rule in order to identify um, and summarize and get on paper uh, how you do what you do, right? And then again, just like the VTO, making these available to everybody within the organization so that you can eventually approach what's called FBA status, or followed by all. And then, with that, you're training your team members, you're outlining what the core processes, and something that they don't talk about in traction, but just kind of rings true to me in this moment, is 3D framework, which is to document, demonstrate, and then delegate, right? So before you can delegate anything to anybody without the organization, first it needs to be documented on paper, so that you can refer back to that. Then you demonstrate to them how it's done, right? That's kind of like training. Ideally, also hands-on training, right? Have them do it and watch them do it at least the first time, and then finally you can delegate that, right? And kind of let go of the vine, as they say in traction. So that's the process component. The next one, and the final, this is the sixth one if you've been counting, is the traction component, right? So the traction component is really what ties all of this together and pushes the company forward. And traction, or EOS, really harps on a 90-day world, right? So set your goals at the beginning of 90 days, get after those goals for 90 days, and then determine how, where you did well, where you didn't go well, right? And the reason they really harp on a 90-day world is because that's human nature. It's actually the rhythm of how long somebody can really focus without coming back to, like, why am I doing this, right? And without committing and promising again. That's why so many of those fitness programs are 90 days, is because, like, that's really how long somebody can make a promise to themselves or make a promise to the organization and follow through without having to come back to why they're actually doing it. So traction component is two parts. So number one is what's referred to as rocks. And so rocks are the strategic priorities of your company. And where rocks really come from is that long-term issues list that I talked about previously. And a rock, the reason they call it a rock is basically from this metaphor or analogy or whatever, where you have a jar, and the jar is really your capacity, right? Your emotional capacity, your time, your capacity. And let's say you have three different things. One's a liquid, one's sand, one's rocks. One is rocks. And the rocks signify the big things, the things that are going to move the organization forward, from a real high level. And if you go in and you fill up your jar with the liquid, which is all the small stuff in the organization, right? Your busy work, maybe emails, maybe just busy stuff, right, within the organization. If you fill up your capacity with the liquid, by the time you come to try and put in either rocks or sand, it's going to overflow, right? But if you start with the big stuff first, you schedule that out, you identify smart milestones for how to accomplish those rocks within the 90 days given, and you put those into your jar, you put those into your calendar. Then you can fit some sand and you can fit some liquid in there, and then you have all three parts, right? The big stuff, the little stuff, all within your capacity. And so rocks, setting the right rocks, and this is part of leadership too, is like setting the right goals, right? Are my goals aggressive enough? Are they realistic? Are they time bound? So all that stuff, acronym is SMART, you could look it up. So traction components encompasses rocks, but it also encompasses meeting pulse or meeting rhythm, right? Which is how often are you meeting with your leadership team and for what duration? So they have a 90-day world. Um, every 90 days, you're going to be having a quarterly meeting. The quarterly meeting is going to be offsite. It's going to be a day. And it's really the main purpose of that meeting is to realign on vision and to set your rocks for the next quarter, right? Those are the main outcomes from your quarterly meetings. The third outcome is you're supposed to have enough time to address more issues during that day-long meeting than you can in a regular weekly leadership meeting. So that's the quarterly meeting, and then once a year, Traction has built in an annual meeting, which is actually 2 days. The second day is a lot like the quarterly meeting. The first day is really more focused on strategy. And so two parts to the traction component is the meeting pulse and rocks. Those are the two parts. And then with the meeting pulse, they really talk about a level 10 meeting, and they have an agenda for what a level 10 meeting looks like. And that's on a weekly basis with your leadership team. And then they have the annuals and quarterlies that I talked about previously. So that's going to be the traction component. All right, so those are the 6 components of EOS, but and the 6 components are all outlined in the book Traction. It's by Gino Wickman. He created the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So I really like EOS because it's approachable. Number one, it's well thought out and a fully integrated system. So if you actually go to their website, you'll see like the Traction library. They have books about how to lead and manage a team. They have books about how to further document your processes and improve on those processes. And then they also have the name of the book, which is What the Heck is EOS, which is really required reading at my organization at this point when a new team member joins. And the audiobook's about 2 hours long. It's low investment for new team members. And what it does is if the team member reads that or listens to the audiobook, they just automatically builds a bunch of context, right? So now they know why we're doing things. Now they know why we have meetings. Now they understand why we're presenting the VTO, how we're presenting it, why we're doing a State of the Union. And so each of these different books is really a well thought out, fully integrated management system, and it's low investment, right? So you can basically self-implement this within your organization at a very low cost. Of course, they have other options. You can go to seminars. You can go and hire an EOS implementer to come in, like do hands-on coaching with your team, and if you have the resources, I think you should do it. But business owners, you're scaling a business, you got a lot of things going on, the library, going to the library and having these resources without having to shell out a bunch of cash is it just puts you way ahead, builds context, builds trust. Your team starts using the same vernacular, and then there's just rules of engagement within the organization automatically built in, and so that's EOS. All right, so that was EOS. So now, as promised, I got 2 additional resources or 2 additional things that I wanted to talk about. Those were the 6 components of EOS. So what I have found, though, is with EOS, there's a missing component. And really that missing component is finance. Where scaling up actually places a lot of emphasis on what they call cash, or like the financial function of your business, EOS really misses the target on that. And what I find with my business, and I should say even with like in my day job as a CPA, running the CPA firm and dealing with our clients, is the finance component is really important for a business that's scaling. And the reason why is simple. Growth is cash, right? So let's say you have a product-based business. Maybe it's an e-commerce business, for instance, and that e-commerce business is taking off and you're growing at a rate of 20%. And your profit margin at the end of the day, after all your direct and indirect expenses, is 20%. Um, if you need to grow your inventory by 20% every year in order to keep up with your demand, well, there goes 100% of the cash that your firm generated, right? So if you're not managing cash flow appropriately, you might be making all the money and growing very quickly, or you might be profitable and growing really quickly, but you might be kind of growing broke or running out of cash. You could experience this as a manufacturing company too. Like, let's say you have manufacturing equipment, and then your demand from your customers gets so high such that one machine doesn't do it anymore, right? Then you got to go and buy another manufacturing machine. It might be $100,000. Well, how are you going to finance that? So the finance component is really what where a good CPA or fractional CFO or something like that might come in and be able to like actually help you understand how fast you can grow safely. And like maybe it's finding debt in order to finance the business, right? But debt increases risk, so you need to be able to model out how quickly can you pay down that debt, or can you actually service the debt, right? Or maybe you have to raise prices on your customers in order to actually have a sustainable business, right? So even service-based businesses that are growing might have these issues. So you can imagine, like, let's say a law firm that only does billing or invoicing at the end of the month, right? And they got to pay all their attorneys. Well, if you're growing, every month your company is going to need more cash in order to pay your employees. And if you're waiting 30 days to issue an invoice and then maybe another 30 days to collect that cash from your actual clients, well, you might have a cash flow problem, right? So the finance component is really important. It's not part of EOS, but maybe a CPA firm like mine, or I identify a good fractional CFO. Bookkeeper might help a little bit, but maybe educate yourself as a business owner on where the cash is coming in and going out. You got to be able to fill in that finance component somehow. All right, the next resource I'd like to provide is, and none of this stuff is necessarily mine, right? So I'm going to be pointing you in the right direction. Is like filling the long-term issues list. So what are the constraints of your business? And they might not be evident to you right away, and you might not know what your business needs to do in order to get to the next level because you've never been there yet, right? You've grown the business to the point where it's at, and you need to go out and learn what bigger businesses do, right? And how bigger businesses have accomplished that. And you could do that through the use of mentors, or like find businesses or business owners who have accomplished that next step that you're trying to get after. But that being said, we're all really busy business owners, right? So I'm really focused on my CPA firm. As much as I love to talk shop, the mentor is not going to have the follow through, and not going to be able to like repeat themselves over and over again in order for you to get it. So I want to point you to a resource. If you go to acquisition.com, there's Alex and Layla Hermosi run this organization. And if you go to acquisition.com and you search for their scaling course, They really break down the organization at different levels, all the way from 0 employees all the way up to, I don't know, 50 or 100 employees. And in each of them, they identify what they call constraints, and constraints within the different functions, product, finance, marketing, sales, customer service. And uh, these constraints really are long-term issues, right? And so um, they're really long-term. They're just long-term issues. It's like they've outlined for you what the probable long-term issues of your company are going to be at each stage. And if you're feeling stuck, you might go back a couple steps and look at like what, like let's say you're a 50-person company. Well, you might go back and see, well, what were the constraints, or what does acquisition.com, or what does Alex Hermosi and Layla Hermosi say um, the constraints would have been at 25, and maybe you missed a step and you didn't even realize it, right? So uh, just kind of invaluable free content that they provide, and go take a look at that. Of course, you can sit down with your leadership team. You could identify and try and smoke out the issues, the short-term and the long-term issues of your company. But you might not have the knowledge within your leadership team right now to get to that next level, and you might feel stuck. And so, their course might help out with that. And in closing, acquisition.com, go check them out. They have other courses too. Just the amount of value that they give for free on their website is amazing. And Alex is real transparent about how he's going to make money and what his time frame is for that, and why he's okay putting this stuff out there for free. The stuff he's putting out there for free is probably hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of value. Otherwise, you can go to scalingup.com to learn more about the Scaling Up management framework. And you could go to eosworldwide.com to learn more about Entrepreneurial Operating System. And all of these folks have books. So, read those books. Hopefully you found today's content useful, and I'll try and do more. That's all.